green finance specialists that we have with us today. Indeed, thanks to all our partners. It's thanks to all of you that we've managed to reach out to all of you and get the word out about this training. And it's so good to see everyone from across the whole Caribbean here today with us. I'd like to hand over now to Mr. Klaus Hesse and Lucy Charrier and Anne Label from the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, who will tell us a little bit more about what MicroPitch is.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Flores, thank you very much for coming in. And just presenting myself, my name is Klaus Hesse. I'm the team leader of the IBTA program, which is actually financing this big event which we have today. It's a very welcome to everybody, and looking forward to many news of green financing and sustainable financing today. Thank you very much. Passing on to my colleague Anne. Good morning.
Good morning also from my side. Happy to have you all here. My name is Anne. I am a project coordinator at Frankfurt School and also part of the program that Klaus was just mentioning. And I'm very much looking forward to the session today. Lucy, go ahead, please.
Good morning, everybody. Very happy to be here today with you and to see you from a lot of countries here. I'm Lucy, and I'm working as well with Anne and Klaus on the technical assistance program of the European Investment Bank in the Caribbean region. Happy to be with you.
All right, we will now quickly walk you through some parts before we start with the actual training that we're all looking forward to. Maybe for you first to get ready and to make sure we're all on the same page. As you might already be seeing, this session is recorded and the recording will be made available afterwards. The same applies for the presentation and the materials. As you indicated your email when registering, we will be happy to share all the materials with you so you can afterwards go through it again, do some further research and make the best out of all the skills and tools you will be learning today, hopefully. And then we also, as last time in the training, the ones that are joining for the second time might know that you have the possibility to get a certificate of attendance of the MicroPitch Entrepreneurship training series if you attend to all the 3 training sessions that we're offering. And this requires you to fill in a quick evaluation form. At the end of the session, we will be sharing a link and a QR code. And within this form, and please within the form, it doesn't apply if you put your email in the chat. Within this form, you can indicate your email and your name. And then once the 3 trainings are over, we make sure that you receive the certificate. Now going over to some Zoom settings. We were reading your feedback from the last session, and we are well aware that it would be great to have a very interactive session where we can allow you to speak, but due to the large number of participants, this is unfortunately not possible. So we have to mute you during the session, but you can use the chat function and the Q&A function. It would be great if, as last time, you use the chat function that actively to exchange with your peers, exchange tips, exchange ideas, and the Q&A function to address questions to the speakers, which they will be answering in a written form and also partly orally in the Q&A session after the training. And with that, I hand over to Klaus, who will quickly introduce the TA program.
Thank you very much, Anne. Yeah, as said, let's say we are developing the Caribbean entrepreneurship training sessions and as well as business plan competition. So this is a whole program. This is our second training, and we are really happy to have you with us today. This is all part of the program organized and financed by the European Investment Bank, but executed by Frankfurt School of Finance and Management for the whole region. And we are doing this already since 2018, since May 2018. And it's really a pleasure, let's say, to be here today. In the next slide, we have some photos of our first event we did already in 2019, and as well the second event, which we did only virtually in June this year. And for today, and this session is part, let's say, of the third edition of the MicroPitch for the CARICOM countries. And as well, in the next slide, let's say, as said, it is part of a whole program, what we're doing today. So it's the second training. We had our first training already last week, where we were talking about digitalization and e-commerce. And today we will talk about green and sustainable business practices. And as well, we will have another training next week as well on Thursday, talking about business management and financial planning. So hope as well that we can welcome you as well for the third training next week. And as well, as you see in the next slide, there is another component of our program, which is our business plan competition. This will actually happen in December, and you can still subscribe for it. And we hope, let's say, that you will motivate yourself as well during this session to come in and as well participate in the business plan competition in December. We will give you some further information as well later on. This is from my side, and I hand over now to Lucy.
Yeah, thank you, Klaus. Thank you. So now we would like to have your opinion on and to know who you are. So I will launch a small poll. So please, we would like to know you better. So we see that you are coming from a lot of countries. So here, please fill in the poll. And so that we can, you should see on your screen the poll. So now you can just fill in the poll, and it's a few questions just to know you better. So for example, we would like to know from which country you are connected with us today, this morning. I see that Belize and Barbados for the moment is very well represented. And then we would like to know if you are a woman or a man, what is your age, and to have an idea of as well if you own your business, if you are an entrepreneur, and for how long you have been with your business. If your business has been in operation for 1 year, 1 to 3 years or more years, to see how long you have been with you as an entrepreneur, your experience, and as well from which sector, in which sector you are working. If you are working in trade, in agriculture, services, tourism, we know that tourism is very important for the region. So we like to know all this information from you. I see that already 78 of you have answered, so I will just let you a few more seconds to fill in the poll, and then we'll stop and look at the results together. So 81, please fill in the poll. Okay, thank you. I just let you 10 more seconds, and then we'll look at the results. 86 of you, thank you for joining from so many people from so many countries. It's really a pleasure to have you all here from the world region. So I will stop in 2 seconds. 90 of you have answered, so I stop now. Okay, let's look at the results together. So can you see the results? I guess that you can see the results on your screen. So you are a lot from Jamaica. Jamaica, 19% are coming from Jamaica. Hello, Jamaica, Kingston, and all the country. Happy to have you here. As well from Barbados, from Belize, Dominica, Haiti. We are very happy to have you here, Haiti. St. Lucia as well, Trinidad and Tobago, and others as well. We'll look at your answers to see the different countries from the registration. So thank you, all of you. Then we have a majority of women, 68%, and 31 male. majority of you have between 33 and 60-year-old, and then from 18 to 33, 26%, and you are majority entrepreneurs, of course, 82%, and you have been operated for, okay, we have like 33% from less than 1 year, so very new in your business and starting the business, and as well 33% from 1 year to 3 years. Okay, very great, and 15% with more than 10 years in your business. And the sectors now, the last questions. So we have from services, 26% of you are working in services, as well tourism, of course, very important, 30%, and I see agriculture as well, and production, 9%. So thank you everybody, very happy to have you, welcome on board. And now I will give the floor to Floris back, and we will start the training.
Thanks very much, everyone. Very interesting to see also a large representation from industry and agro processing, as well as services. We hope the training will be particularly useful for you today. So I'm very pleased to welcome our two trainers today. First is Diana Kolani, who's a climate finance expert and senior project manager at the Frankfurt School of Finance and Management. Diana has over 12 years experience in climate finance, SME development finance, and business and incubation support. She's worked with SMEs and startups and corporates around the world to operationalize and scale up business models and green investments. She's worked with project developers and companies to become investor ready, and especially worked with women and young people to drive financial inclusion. She's also worked on transaction advisory and due diligence, investor matching, and trainings. She has a Master's in International Business from Frankfurt School of Finance and Management, and is a certified expert in sustainable finance and SME finance, amongst others. Our second trainer is Maria Baez, a clean energy and finance expert and senior project manager from the Frankfurt School. She has 10 years of financial assignments focusing on renewable energy and clean energy technology, especially in Latin America and the Caribbean. Maria has actively supported the implementation of a number of climate market assessments and financial feasibility studies in implementing green finance credit lines. She's identified investment opportunities, performed credit investment analyses, prepared project business plans, conducted risk assessments, and involved in equity and fundraising, viability assessments, as well as project finance modeling, amongst others. She has a long track record working with equity investors and banks, especially in renewable energy advisory, and alongside technical consultants, project stakeholders, lawyers, landowners, and local councils. She's a CFA chartered holder, which is a chartered financial analyst, and she has an executive MBA from the IESE Business School in Spain. As Anna mentioned, we have our general chat function, and please use that for a discussion forum amongst yourselves. If you have questions for other participants, or you want to share links or resource materials, please use the chat function for that. For any questions for our experts today, we have the Q&A box, which is also found at the bottom of your screen, where you can pose questions, which we can then address both during the training and in the Q&A part of the session. That would be very helpful if you can keep that separate, and then we'll also be able to track all the questions properly. In fact, we already have received our first question, which I will endeavor to address when the training starts. So without further ado, I'm very pleased to hand over now to Diana for the first part of the training.
Thank you very much, Floris, for the nice introduction. I hope everyone can hear me well. I would like to give an introduction to sustainable business practices, a background on what sustainability is, what we understand from it, a bit how it developed, and where we stand now. And then I would also like to tell you what does it mean for you as a business at whatever level you're operating and whatever sector you're operating in. So thanks a lot for sharing that information in the poll. Okay, so first of all, why is it even that we talk a lot about sustainability recently? It's not a new topic, but of course it's very prominent right now, and there are very different angles to look at this. Of course, there are different dynamics to it as well. So one is depicted here, which means, which looks basically at the change in gross domestic product per capita. So it looks at, income generation, and you can see that especially the developing regions are most affected by sustainability risks or climate change, whatever name you would like to give it. There are other dynamics to it. You could look at biodiversity, you could look at climate change and temperature increase, extreme weather events. They will probably show similar results. This is just one way to look at it. And that's a huge risk. And therefore, we would like to increase awareness and provide you some options and some more knowledge and tools, what you can do at your end to work towards a more sustainable economy and future. We also see a lot of the key global players working around the topic of sustainability from various angles. The COP26 conference is just going on in Glasgow. Of course, we have the European Investment Bank, we have the European Union, we have the World Bank, we have the United Nations. We have so many organizations putting a lot of effort into this topic to drive it from various angles, to provide capacity, to provide knowledge, but also to provide financing that ultimately should benefit businesses like yours to implement sustainable business practices. Sorry. So what is it that we understand with sustainability? There are three elements that we look at when talking about sustainability. So one is one that we are maybe most familiar with, the environmental dimension. And there we look at how can businesses reduce the pressure on the environment by using resources as inputs, but also providing outputs, especially greenhouse gas emissions, CO2 emissions, are indicators that are usually looked at, which of course are not the only indicators for pollution. There are others as well. We would like to minimize waste. We want to improve efficiency of the use of resources, and the whole aspect of a circular economy comes into play here. There's the social element. So sustainable businesses would like to create also a social impact in the local and global communities. Every business has their direct community they're working with, but then there are also the customers and the employees, and there are certain indicators which we will look at later on that can help you understand and define your social business practices. And finally, there's the G element, the governance element, which looks at the leadership, accountability of your business, internal controls, shareholder rights, and also topics like corruption, anti-bribery, and terrorism. These three elements sometimes are also referred to as the triple bottom line. So that's the perspective of planet, people, and profit. So actually the discussion is not how you can combine profit, or there's not the discussion around making it a trade-off to generate profit and create sustainability, but rather this has to just go hand in hand. And even many of the financiers and many of the ones that maybe you've seen on the previous slides, local financiers, but also global and international ones, have adopted some sort of sustainability framework and risk assessment, and would like to see that reflected in business operations for them to make their investment assessments, assess their options, and also ultimately make their returns on investment. This is just a brief, slides. This is just a brief snapshot, just to place it in everyone's mind where we stand when we talk about the development of sustainability. So as I said before, it's not a new topic. It started a couple of decades ago, where we maybe called it more CSR, corporate social responsibility, where many corporations incorporated sustainable aspects in their strategies, either as a core business or as a side effect, and more as a do good practice. It was in the 90s that we had the first COP, so the first conference of the parties, where the world leaders came together in Rio and really discussed and focused on the threats and impacts of climate change, which was a turn in history towards orienting and giving a sharp focus on sustainability. And this became even more pronounced in this past decade, since 2013-15. First of all, 2015 was a very active year. We had the launch of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. We'll come back later to that, and they overlap a lot with the topic of sustainability and can give you a lot of ideas also for your business, how you could phrase your sustainability objectives. And of course, we had the Paris Agreement happening in COP21 in 2015, where especially the financial sector was given a lot of responsibility and attention for playing an active role in shaping a sustainable world economy. And I would just like to ask you to fill out a small poll with regards to how well do you feel you understand the topic of sustainability. You should see it on your screen. Please just take a minute to provide your answer. Maybe you're an expert, maybe you've heard about it, maybe it's very new to you. That will be very useful to collect this feedback. And I just give it a minute or two for everyone to put in a response. In case you can't see it, maybe someone can flag it to me, but it should show on your screen. Does it show on anyone's screen? Is it just me who can see this? Because I have no response so far. Okay, stuff is happening now. Thank you.
Now it should be working, yes.
Yes, thank you. Okay, now I can see the numbers going up. That looks very lively here. Thank you. Maybe just 30 more seconds and then I'll close the poll. Then we should have collected most of the responses, hopefully. So I'm closing it and then I will share it. So I think we're in the middle range somewhere. Many people say it's okay. They have an okay understanding of sustainability, or somehow understanding, which is fair enough. Quite a good number who say very well, and a few who say not at all. That's fine. I hope after this training, this will change. Thank you for this. So now I would like to go a little deeper into why you as a business should look at sustainable business practices and sustainability as a topic. So in your context, as I mentioned before, there are these three elements: ESG, environment, social, and governance. It's not only, how can I say, it's not only about awareness or creating an impact, it can have a direct effect on your business, on your revenue generation, and both on the upside as well as on the downside. So let's look at the environment. So for example, through waste management, through pollution, there could be, certain elements in the regulation or penalties and fines that may affect your financial revenue as well. Or on the other side, you could create a positive environmental impact and you may be granted tax benefits or carbon credits or other sources of revenues that can benefit you as a business. Same for the social factors for human health, but also labor and working conditions and effects to the communities. We should always think this through not only as upside, but also from a risk perspective. And there are different legal requirements we have to keep in mind, and you all come from different countries, so that may differ from country to country, but probably is quite uniform on a basic level. And finally, on the governance, regulatory, compliance, and liability side, there may be liabilities arising from certain practices related to integrity. I mentioned corruption before. So there are some key questions we'll bring up later that help you think through this process and come up with adequate processes. And on top of just these key questions may then help you assess your status quo, and then you can actually take it also a step further and create a more focused thinking and management system around it, or framework. It's often called an environmental and social management system, ESMS, or a sustainability framework that provides you with a tool to integrate these consideration into your processes and your risk management as a business. And it also explains procedures for assessing and managing some of these risks that may result out of the practices, especially when it comes to you as a business for fundraising. Many of the external capital providers will ask these questions, and it will help you to provide thorough answers to it. The next aspect we would like to look at are green investments from maybe both perspectives of the capital providers as well as the businesses. So green or sustainable investments are terms that are often used interchangeably. So what we mean with this is that there is a positive impact on the three elements of the environment, the social elements, as well as the economy and the governance aspects. So we think, and several of the key players that I mentioned before, that those type of investments are not limited to specific sectors, but you will find sustainable and green practices in almost any sector. And we heard that a lot of you are active in services, in agriculture, in trade, and one or two others. So therefore, there's a lot of potential in each of these sectors, and you will find some examples here. And maybe we can also provide you some more examples or case studies in the discussion later on. But of course, the most obvious one is maybe energy. Energy comes up a lot. There's renewable energy potential in all countries, but depending on your country, it may be related rather to solar or to wind or to hydro sources, depending on your country's geographic location. And some of these sources exist from very micro and small levels that you can use as a business to reduce, let me say, your energy consumption, but also your energy costs. So you will have savings around this, and then you will have a trickle down effect on the environment through reduced CO2 emissions, for example, as well, or other pollution that is often created through diesel and so on. Construction and buildings, there's a lot of focus going into energy efficiency for buildings, but also producing more sustainable construction products as well, housing. Sustainable housing, affordable housing is a big topic that often falls under this. Agriculture and water, it's very complex, especially also when we look at social indicators. You would probably need some expertise and expert inputs in that process to get a thorough assessment, but just very high level. In agriculture, we use, and especially agriculture processing, you more or less use all the resources, you use water, you use soil, you use energy. So therefore, there's lots of potential to turn this around and make this more sustainable. And also there's a direct impact on the community, whether it's small scale farmers, whether there's any waste going into the environment that the community is exposed to, and so on. Same for forestry and fisheries. And then maybe finally the last one, waste and recycling. We are all aware that, and there's recent trends on plastic bans in so many countries. We are all aware that there's a lot of plastic waste going into our oceans, into the environment. So the concept of recycling, upcycling, maybe even circular economy covers that topic and poses a very high potential for sustainable businesses. All right. So as I mentioned before, there are several key indicators that you can drill down a little further when you would like to see, okay, what do I need to look at if I want to know if my business is sustainable, depending on what sector you're active in. This overview comes from the CDC checklist. We provided a link to it in the reference list as well, so you can check it out on your own when you have more time. But very roughly, you can see that there's a drop-down list of different sector activities, and then there are different indicators of the ENS risks, especially here, so the environmental and social risks. So you will see that labor and working conditions play a big role, pollution prevention, resource efficiency, community health, safe and secure working conditions, also the impact on biodiversity, conservation or natural resources management, land acquisition, or resettlement of communities in case of repurposing of land. And then finally, indigenous people and cultural heritage. So those are indicators, no matter what kind of performance standards, typology, whatever you would like to look at, of the IFC, of the CDC, of the EIB, they are probably all categorized in these similar categories, and they may help you understand when you see some of these types of conditions touching on your business, how you could communicate and structure this in your business practices. Yeah, this is just to close the loop then on sustainability in your business context. As I mentioned before, it's never just one element, there are several elements. You don't have to cover all of them, or you don't have to go into very much detail of all of them, depending on how big your business is, how complex your operations are. But often how externals and also investors may look at your business is that, okay, you could focus on one pillar, let's say society or the environment, but there should be hopefully a do no harm principle for the other elements as well. So as much as you're greening the environment, do no harm to the society or vice versa. So that's basically just, yeah, a key message from here. And as I mentioned before, since 2015, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, and they basically provide a uniform understanding for impact. They're not the only impact indicators, there are more, but those are commonly understood, commonly known, and initially they were created to be used and defined by countries to set their own targets and goals and how they would like to develop and grow their economies and their countries. But more and more companies and also investors use these indicators to align their activities and to assess investment opportunities. So it may also be helpful for you to look at the SDGs and see, okay, which of these areas may overlap with your business practices. When we look into the agriculture sector, very often it's around food production, food security, but it could be also a circular economy approach. Zero hunger is an indicator that feeds into this. If we have businesses that may distribute solar lanterns or solar home systems, access to affordable and clean energy is an indicator, but also, for example, a job creation could be one, because once you have power, you can become more productive. So there's probably often 2 or 3 indicators that are applicable to a business and that you can use to shape your sustainability story and communicate your story and yeah, your thought process, and also think through the risks that may come with it. And at this point, I would just like to launch another poll and understand how applicable sustainability is for your business at the point in time where we are right now. Let me know if this is working. I've launched it on at my end. How applicable is sustainability for your business practices? I don't know, Anna, if you need to relaunch it again. Okay, I can see activity now. Thank you. Let's maybe give it one more minute. Is there quite a number of responses coming in? All right, I'll end it here. Thank you very much. So I can see that I'm sharing this. A good number, and actually the majority think it's the sustainability is very applicable to their business and directly addresses their operations. So that's very encouraging to see. Some think it's somehow the business uses some sustainability measures. That's also very good, especially for small businesses. And some are still thinking about it, which is fair enough. We've also seen that quite a number of your businesses are still very young. So it takes time to think through the different business elements. And then also, of course, sustainability. Thank you very much for this. So with the next slide, I would like to provide you a snapshot of an option of a tool and how to assess the sustainability of your business, how you could go about it. We have seen already some other questions and indicators. If you wonder, okay, how do I put this into practice? How do you break this down from the guideline and from the big topics to your business? You could just start with a simple list like this. Take a framework. This is based on the IFC performance standards. Look at the different standards and formulate your questions from there. Maybe this is very small and you don't have to read through it one by one. It's just to illustrate an example. But we could look at, for example, the first category is society. And the first question is how your business practice or the business practice would improve health and well-being of its immediate community. So you could say, yes, it does, or it doesn't, and these are the reasons, X, Y, Z. For example, if you produce maize flour in your community through agro-processing, you have a maize mill, then you could think about it in a way that you improve food security in your region. Then as a next step, when we look at the environment, is your product or service creating any pollution to the environment? Maybe it's a diesel powered mill. You could actually say, yes, it does, because it's powered by diesel. Do I have any other option? Could I maybe purchase a solar system? So these are some of these questions you could go through individually one by one, and then also think through for yourself, is there a risk allocated to it? Is there any change in the local regulation? Maybe the government says, okay, from 5 years from now, we will not allow any new diesel generator purchases anymore. Or we will put in a plastic ban and there will be no polyethylene bags anymore. And maybe if you use some of these resources in your business, this may pose a risk because you need to look for other raw materials and inputs, and the costs may change and so on. So this could be one way to structure it, and we just created this tool in Excel format. So hopefully this will be something that's accessible to many of you. And I would like to ask another question at this point through the poll, whether your business has implemented any sustainability mechanisms in your business yet. So I'm launching this on the screen right now. Okay, thank you. I think here we are still a little more in the thought process compared to the first question where we asked, okay, how is your business related to sustainability? But then have you actually implemented any sustainability measures? There's quite a good number that say somehow, some you have implemented some sustainability measures. That's very good and definitely the way to go. Some are still thinking about it and some have not done anything on this. So hopefully we will give you still, when Maria talks about some examples, some ideas what you can do in your business to make it more sustainable.
Just a quick question. That Excel looks useful. How can we share that? Do you think we can put that on the MicroPitch website eventually as well?
Yeah, let me confirm that for you.
Or maybe we could just make a picture of it and then upload the pictures that people can refer to it later.
Definitely, yeah, it's in the presentation. So as pictures, we can definitely share. Yes.
Brilliant. Thanks.
Okay. So with the next topic, and that's almost the last one, I thought it may be useful for you to understand how sustainable organizations are often categorized, and probably you're all aware, of course, they're NGOs, they're charities. So they often purely look at impact and sustainability, not really at revenue. And maybe if they look at revenue only to sustain themselves, they often are funded through grants, through donations. So they're at the very, what is it here now, left-hand side of the sphere. And then we have the pure profit-oriented businesses on the right-hand side that we all associate with traditional investments, with maximizing return on profit and so on. And then we have quite a couple of rather new developments in between. So there are social or green enterprises or social and green businesses that intentionally are founded and funded in order to achieve also social and green impact. And they're working around these topics for the purpose of creating that impact, as well as to become economically sustainable and fund this through a for-profit mechanism to show that, okay, we can achieve both. We can achieve positive social and environmental impact, as well as be profitable and make this sustainable, create jobs, create income. And those businesses are funded through various providers, for example, development finance, impact finance providers, sustainable finance providers. And those funders look at sustainable organizations, not, as I mentioned before, as a trade-off between return and impact, but as a combination of both, as a combined value proposition. And then finally, just to round this topic off, what do we understand with sustainable finance? Because I threw this term in there in the previous slide. Sustainable finance is not a new instrument per se. You will find that here there's equity, there's debt, there's public investment, there's mezzanine capital, there's bonds, there's assets, there's all kinds of instruments that have been around. It basically just means repurposing them a little bit. And many of the old players and the same players that are providing the traditional instruments are also providing sustainable finance instruments. But very often it comes with a different risk profile. As I said before, it's not only about maximizing return on investment, but it's also about, okay, what is the risk I take into my portfolio that comes with this enterprise, which translates into a risk to the environment or the society. Maybe sometimes these companies then, because they reduce the risk for the environment or the society on one hand, may present a lower profit on the other in terms of in pure economic terms. But once we look at it in combination, some of the investors then may be willing to accept this new risk profile that they have not been used to before. We also see a more problem-solving and blended finance approach, and very often those are quite closely tied to the SDGs that we were looking at. So especially public and private investors and funders may come together and join hands and provide a mechanism that we often see as pay for success instruments. So once we achieve certain indicators that may translate into positive environmental or social impact, a payment may be triggered with it. And that is what helps those businesses to become economically sustainable and make profit. Yeah, that's basically a lot of the dynamics we see here. Maybe there are some more like, you know, high net worth individuals or family offices, social impact and green finance providers that are quite active in these topics. But as I mentioned before, also some more of the traditional ones are active as well. And at this point, I would like to ask my last question, and then I'm very thankful for the patience you had with me asking so many questions, whether you know of any funding options for sustainable businesses. And I've launched that on the screen right now. Do you know funding options for businesses to become more sustainable or to fund sustainable businesses? And maybe that's an action point for us. We know that we have to raise more awareness. Okay, these responses come in very nicely. I'll give it 10 more seconds and I'll close it. Okay, sharing these now. So we see that more than half probably of you think you don't know of any of sustainable funding options. That's very interesting and a good point to note. Maybe if one of the colleagues wants to pick that up later, I'm less familiar with the CARICOM region myself. Usually there are always some options. It's just that, yes, they may be less visible, and that's a problem. You know, there's often financing available, those businesses who need financing, but how can we make them meet? And that's probably also one of the objectives of the program. Some of you say, yes, I heard about them, and yes, there are a few. But again, a few may not be enough, and then only very few who say, yes, there are plenty of options. Thank you very much for this insights from your end. And I think I'm through with my part. So the next slide is just about sharing some of the resources that you can look at in terms of shaping your journey to become more sustainable, increase your knowledge on sustainability. And therefore, I hand over to my colleague, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Diana. A very interesting description of sustainability in businesses. And it is a pleasure to be here. I will now share my screen to present the second part of this presentation. Okay, I hope that you can see my screen now. Excellent. Okay, so after an introduction of what are sustainable business practice and why it makes sense for your company, now I will go a bit to the specifics of sustainable projects. I was reading in the chat of Zoom that many of you mentioned diesel technologies versus electricity storage generated with solar. All of these ideas and these new technologies, you mentioned different innovative storage technologies, are all worth assessing. And There are some projects that make more sense also for micro and small enterprises, which we will take a look in more detail now. So as Diana mentioned, the sustainability approach for companies can mean environmental, social, or governance elements and activities. But whether it is E, S, or G, it is without a doubt a priority for companies right now of all sizes. We just need to notice how clients are demanding it. When they buy or when they approach companies, they are looking for sustainable companies, sustainable products, sustainable services. I mean, experts around the globe and across the board, they agree in that our current energy matrix is not sustainable. It is polluting. It is not adequate. It is centralized. It is inefficient. It has a lot of disadvantages. And in the Caribbean region, climate change is already increasing the risk of hurricanes and other severe weather events. So from this perspective, a new approach to the energy system and sustainable energy investments makes sense. It is a very important pillar within sustainability. However, for this to be a reality, there are some preconditions. Let's take a look. So from the perspective of a business, if you are, for instance, assessing whether to install a solar PV in the rooftop of your company or even in the rooftop of your home, it is indeed a bottleneck not having adequate financing alternatives. Like in the poll, we saw that many of us were not very well aware of the array of options that there are for green investments. But it is very important to have specific and adequate, best suited products for green projects. For instance, for electric mobility, for solar systems, for energy efficiency, etc. That could effectively enable investment. And in many cases, without a financing option, there is no project at all because the capital requirements are relatively high, for instance, for a solar system. So to be able to then reap the benefits, environmental and social benefits of sustainable energy investments, which, by the way, are getting cheaper and cheaper. For instance, solar systems, it's incredible the pace at which the kilowatt hour is decreasing. And in many cases, it's already competitive with the electricity prices from the grid in many countries. There is a need for policy and regulatory measures, targets and incentives for the different actors, for households, for SMEs, etc. So let's take a look at some policy goals. So in particular, for the Caribbean region, there is the target of having almost 50% of renewable energy in the energy matrix by 2027, and cutting almost 40% of CO2 emissions by 2027. So ambitions are high. Let's take a look at the progress. So for example, regarding renewable energy targets, we see for each country in the upper part of the bar in gray, the year in which the target should be attained. And then we see the different colors for the different renewable energy technologies: hydro, biomass, solar PV, and wind. And the conclusion here is that, in general, there is a long way to go to be able to attain the target. We see, for instance, Belize has quite a bit of hydro, Dominica as well, Suriname as well, and then the target is a bit closer, and then some countries, Belize, Suriname, they already exceeded the regional target, the average. However, there is a long way to go. But there are incentives for renewable energies, also for energy efficiency, to be able to increase the pace at which the region is advancing and being able to fulfill these targets. I want to, because I saw in the chat that some of you were talking about solar, self-consuming, the solar heat that was stored. So this is, in this case, it would be interesting to see whether there is some net metering or net billing scheme in place that would enable the business to invest in a PV system and then self-consume the solar energy that is being produced, and either the excess that is being produced from the solar, but it's not being consumed by the business, it's fed into the grid, and afterwards there is a net metering mechanisms in which this excess energy is monetized or valorized in energy terms, and you also benefit from this excess. This excess is not lost. Or another option would be if this excess can be sold to the grid. Either way, this is very helpful for solar investments, and it's worthwhile to take a look at what incentives there are for example, for this case, for self-consuming solar systems. These kind of measures have the effect of making the investment profitable, enabling the investment, and the investment can be repaid in less years and would potentially make sense from a financial perspective as well. There are also energy efficiency targets. We see, for instance, Antigua and Barbuda, 10% reduction in energy intensity, Barbados, Belize, Dominica, many countries have their national energy efficiency targets. So this is happening for many types of green investments that make sense for businesses. Let's take a look at some energy efficiency measures that could potentially make sense for your business. For instance, next time that you have to change a light bulb, maybe you have two options. You have a LED bulb or you have a less efficient light bulb with a shorter lifespan, but with more energy consumption, although cheaper. So you have to compare these two. In this case, it's very important to compare not only the initial cost of the technology, because more efficient technologies tend to be more expensive in the first year. However, they have savings throughout the lifetime of the technology, which generally is quite larger than the more polluting or more inefficient technologies. So lighting is one example. Then another example could be ceiling fans, for instance, AC units, refrigerators. Okay, this depends a lot on the business. Insulation is also important. I saw in the chat that one of you was asking about solar heat storage. For instance, insulation would make sense from that perspective. So we saw, or we talked about some measures, right? This solar self-consumption or buying more efficient light bulb. So how to evaluate whether these projects are attractive from the business perspective? So this is a summary of some steps that could help make the analysis a bit more structured. First, defining the perspective. What kind of technology are we assessing? So we can talk, for instance, about electric mobility. Okay, we have the option of buying a diesel car or an electric vehicle. Which type of technologies are we assessing, and what is the perspective of our analysis? For example, from the perspective of our business, and the metric that we will see at first is profitability. So we want to take a look at step 2, cash flows. What is a cash flow? Cash flow means in monetary value, the impact to the business. So it doesn't take into consideration accounting issues, only the impact in cash in the business. Cash out from the investment, cash in from inflows, revenues, or maybe savings, because the savings are some sort of negative cash outflow, right? It has a positive impact. So let's continue with this example, electric mobility. So we have these two options. The electric vehicle costs $40,000. However, the gasoline car costs $30,000. However, the electric vehicle just consumes electricity, and the costs are very small per month in comparison to the diesel vehicle that consumes gasoline, which means a very large expense for the business each month. So we have to compare these two values, and we have to avoid considering sunk costs, which are the costs that were already incurred by the business and that cannot be changed. So these costs are forgotten, let's say. Some infrastructure that you bought in the past does not play a role in the investment analysis. Last, after the cash flows are defined, estimated, the metrics have to be defined, identified. If we are interested in the financial perspective, then we can use financial metrics. There are other metrics that could be interesting for us. For instance, how many jobs will I create by using this newer technology? Or how many, or what impact will I have in my community? That are other maybe answers or impacts that we want to reflect. And finally, it's always good to take into consideration the question, what would happen if? What would happen with the results of this evaluation if electricity prices decrease a lot or gasoline prices increase much more than what I expected, etc. Just to make sure that the base case, the analysis reflects the most probable scenario, and also that one considers what would happen in a more extreme scenario. Some important inputs were already mentioned: the initial investment, the savings, if we are talking about a solar project or an energy efficiency project, what incentives we can receive, etc. If you are taking a loan, the cost of debt, of course, should be incorporated. The structure of the model can be very simple, can have two parts, inputs and calculations, or it can be more sophisticated if the project is more complex or if more detail is required. In terms of metrics, we can group them in two, in terms of whether the time value of money is considered or not. So what is time value of money, right? Let's take a look at this. We want to see, we want to compare the value of $100 received today with respect to the value of $100 received in the future. For example, if I can have energy savings today because I invest today in a clean technology, what does it mean with respect to the situation in which I wait one more year, for instance? Or if I'm comparing two technologies, one requires a longer time to start generating savings, therefore I only receive the savings in 2 years' time. However, in the other technology, I start receiving the savings from day one. This is the type of situations in which time value of money play a role, and it's important. With this, I would kindly request Anne if she can help me with the first question of the poll. What is the present value of 100 euros received 1 year from now? Or in other words, what is the value today of a energy saving that I will have next year of $100? For instance, in the electricity bill, is it more or less than $100? So again, what is, from today's perspective, what is the value of $100 that I will receive in 1 year time? Okay, I see this is moving quite a bit. So while we see the answers, let me share an Excel to show you, or so that we walk together throughout this this exercise. Can you see my Excel? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So there was no, I think, no agreement, clear agreement on whether the value today of $100. Exactly. Thank you, Anna. So we see that 60% of the respondents answered more than 100, and 40% responded less than 100. So we don't have an agreement, but let's work together on this. So first of all, I would like to say that there is one important element when we conduct this assessment of future values, that is risk. Generally, clean energy technologies, they have a long lifetime. Solar systems, they can produce clean energy for 25 years easily. An efficient light bulb also has a very long lifetime. So it's very important to consider what will happen in the future. And in this sense, the answer is the present value of a future $100 value is less than 100. Why? It is less because, first, to be able to have 100 in the future, I need to invest money today. And then there is some risk, intrinsic risk of future values. And the same applies. The same applies in the opposite way. That means if I, for instance, I put my money in the bank account now, how much money will I have in the future? Generally, there is some inflation. So generally, maybe we have some profitability on this cash. So in general, the present value is always lower, okay? Because of risks, because of inflation, because of profitability requirements, etc. Okay, so this is important for the subsequent calculations that we will do together. So now we understand that $100 today is worth more than $100 in the future. And this is important when calculating, for example, net present value. The net present value effectively considers the present value of all cash inflows and deducts the present value of all cash outflows. This formula looks very strange, but let me give you an example. So we have, for instance, an investment in electric mobility. So we have to pay $48,000 today for an electric car. but we will have for 10 years gasoline savings. And this is what it means. With this, let's try to work a bit around net present value. And I would like to ask again, Anne, if you could help me with this, with the second question. What investment would you prefer? A, B, or C? This is not an easy question, and it's a bit tricky because everyone has their own preferences. Maybe you want to use the NPV rule, or maybe you want to consider other elements which are important for you and for your business. I see. Okay. So we see that the majority chose B. Let's go again to the Excel and walk through this example. The ones that answered B, which were the majority, actually, you must have used your calculator, or you are really aligned with the NPV rule, which says that the project that has the highest NPV, it's the preferred project, because it has the highest value as of now, from the perspective of the business in this case. Exactly. So how is this being calculated with the NPV rule? These formulas are very useful when doing these sorts of calculations. I mean, a project assessment can have a couple of lines only. It can be quite simple. I purchase a solar system and I will have these savings throughout the lifetime of the system. But what does this mean in terms of profitability or attractiveness? Does it make sense to invest? So the answer for this one would be, from the profitability point of view, it makes sense. It has a positive net present value, it generates value, and we are using here a discount rate to apply the time value of money formula that we saw, which says that there are risks in the future, there is uncertainty in the future, and there is a required return on the savings that we will benefit from in the future. So these three projects are attractive from a profitability perspective. But the second one is the best suited one from the NPV perspective. Okay. Then we have the IRR, that is also a very popular metric. I think that with NPV, both are very, very popular and important when assessing investments, green investments as well. And the IRR is the discount rate that makes the net present value equal to 0. If you remember, if the project has a net present value of higher than 0, then it is an attractive project. And if it's negative, then it's the contrary. In general, the rule says, accept investments that have an IRR that is higher than your required profitability. So only if the return of this project is higher than 10%, which is the minimum return that I require, I will invest in this project. Anne, please, I swear it's, I think, almost the last one. Could you please help me with this one? Would you invest in this project? Take a look at the cash flows. Okay, I see that there is a general agreement, more than 80%, it's moving, but it's moving upwards, of participants that say, yes, I will invest in this project. Let's take a look. Excellent. So 87% of you say, yes, I will invest in this project. And it looks like a good idea. Shall I invest? So assuming that our minimum required return is 10%, the IRR is higher than 10%, the present value is significant, and the net present value is positive. This could be a way to assess a solar project, an energy efficiency project, where you have a relatively high investment in the first year, but then you have many savings. I mean, and this is a simple example, but in solar, you have many years of savings. And these metrics are useful. The formula for IRR is just IRR of the values, and the formula of the NPV is just you have to deduct the capex, the investment, and use the NPV formula with the discount rate. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. We will go a bit fast with this one because this is the one that in the first slide where we divided dynamic and static. It was the static metric that does not take into consideration the time value of money. And the good thing of simple payback is just when you go and talk to an expert and they tell you, in 3 years, you have your money back, or in 2 years, you have your money back. It's just a quick calculation of, okay, the savings in 2 years are enough to repay the investment. So it's a very quick proxy of profitability measure. It can be useful many times, but please be aware that in a detailed and important project assessment, you need to have other metrics that take into account that the values in the future does not have the same value than the value they would have today. Let's see solar projects. Some of you were interested in self-consumption. So how would we perform a more detailed analysis? The inflows would be the savings, energy generated for solar times the electricity tariff that you would be avoiding to pay from the utility. Then consider, please, operating costs. For instance, if you need to maintain the solar system. However, for small businesses, for households, solar systems just require some cleaning periodically. So it's not high at all. Then, of course, if you have to pay any taxes, and then the capital expenditure, the cost of the modules and the installation. And with this, you would have all of the elements to make the calculations that we have seen. I hope this was useful for you, and I would like to then end the presentation with some key elements for you to consider when assessing whether to implement sustainable practices. So some tips that were identified in a report called Sustainability and SMEs, authored by SIM. So first, regarding strategy and planning, take a broad view about sustainability. It's not only climate, it has to do also with communities, it has to do with employees, the different stakeholders, governance, as we saw in the first part of the presentation. Second, define in detail what sustainability means to your company, depending on whether your company it's in one sector or another sector, or the size of your company, the structure of your company, the the value chain of your company, you would like to focus on one or other activity. You would like to assess installing solar systems, or maybe measuring, for instance, the decrease in energy consumption, or having a more gender equality in the team, etc. It depends on the company. So each company should define in detail their own track to travel towards sustainability. Engage all stakeholders, not only the team deciding on sustainability, but also clients, suppliers, investors, employees, and take into account the opinions of all. Remember that there are incentives that you could use. For instance, for solar, for energy efficiency, it would be good to ask around, and also to contact initiatives that help business become more sustainable in each of the countries. Then establish responsibility, communicate widely, and also maybe have one sustainability champion to drive the actions of the business. Take it slowly, because in general, it's a very long path towards sustainability. So with patience and step by step, it should be efficient and effective. Walk the talk, because you know, as you might have read in many different in different sources, greenwashing is it's a plague. So many actors talk about sustainability, but actions is what is relevant. Then finally, tie sustainability to profit. We talked about solar, we talked about energy efficiency, also reducing water. All of these measures mean that the company is being more efficient, and also in many cases it means cost savings. So that's important to note. Measure, monitor, and review progress. This is always a good advice. And the final advice is invest in the future, and be aware that the highest investment is generally time, committing to sustainability. And with this, I would like to thank you once again and hope you enjoyed the session. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Maria and Diana, for those presentations, giving us both an overview of what is happening in the world when it comes to sustainability, some very good references for, you know, what is the best practice out there if you really want to go into details around what organizations like the European Investment Bank and other multilateral institutions consider as important for sustainability. And then Maria presenting some financial approach to assessing an investment decision. Is it a good idea to make that investment or not? Now, we've had a lot of questions during the presentations, and thank you so much for that. We have some time left, and I would like to invite you all, please, to consider that we have now got Diana and Maria at your disposal to answer your questions when it comes to green and sustainable investments. So please pop your questions in the Q&A down at the bottom of the screen. Also, maybe you want to have a look at the questions that have already been answered. Now, some of the things that have come up, one of the questions that came up several times was about how to access funding and grants for these kind of sustainability investments. And that's a very fair question. From the outset, we have to recognize that there's many initiatives ongoing, but they tend to be quite fragmented and sometimes hard to know what's going on. But without that being said, the first people I'd like to point you all to is the partners that we have joining us today that have made this training possible, and that have probably to some extent also made you aware that this training was happening, because all these partners have their own initiatives when it comes to supporting small businesses and especially supporting green and sustainable investments, which is obviously, you know, one of our main objectives for our work. They're available on the MicroPitch, all the names are available on the MicroPitch website, but I'll just quickly run through them again, or maybe they're just the main ones. I know for sure that the EU has a program for small businesses through Caribbean Export, one of our partners today. That's called the Direct Assistance Grant Scheme. We have a United Nations Development Program is running its Future Tourism Project. That is also training, and I believe there's some grants available there for SMEs in the tourism sector, admittedly, but hopefully that'll be relevant for some of you. The Caribbean Climate Innovation Center will have resources also about what kind of sustainability investments you can make. I'm not sure if they have grants, but you could have a look there. Then we have Compete Caribbean, which runs periodic call for proposals. I think a few months ago, they ran a call for proposals for the agricultural sector, and they will keep coming up sporadically. And they also have a wealth of resources on their website. Apart from that, we have all the financing institutions, each country that we work in, such as we have the Development Finance Corporation, Grenada Development Bank, St. Lucia Development Bank, Dominica Aid Bank. We have Lasco Financial Services. We have Sofides and Acme in Haiti. These organizations are also set up to support MSMEs such as yourself. And admittedly, it's not that the money is just available. When it comes to grants, often these are run on a competitive basis. They are run on the basis that there will be a call for proposals that might be once a year or once every 2 years. It depends on the organization. And you need to be aware when they happen. And I would recommend that everyone signs up to the mailing list of these different organizations so that you are alerted whenever a new initiative is launched that you could participate in. Secondly, obviously, there's an application process and a screening process, and sometimes also the grants are competitive. So there's no guarantees that they'll be available, but there are resources. When it comes to the loan financing from the development banks I mentioned, it also depends on your project and your business and the financial robustness of your business. There's no way around that. I also work for a bank. It is our responsibility to get the money back so that we can run a sustainable business and offer that money again to future clients, and also pay it back to those depositors or the people that lent us the money to allow us to provide the loans in the first place. So I know it can seem disheartening sometimes working with banks because we have so many requirements and we seem to have so many questions, and it seems to be so risk averse, but there is a rationale behind that, and that is that we have to do everything we can to make sure that our businesses are also sustainable and that we don't end up losing money for the people that have entrusted it to us. So we would ask you for your forbearance and patience, and try and also work with your bank to listen to what the requirements are, because in the end, the bank's financial perspective should also help you make the right investment decisions for your business, because they will not lend you money for something which they don't think you will be able to repay. At least they shouldn't if they're doing their work properly. I would also like to mention Caribbean Development Bank, one of our major partners. I know they have technical assistance programs for small businesses. Have a look on their website and see what's available. There's a certain amount of proactivity and work required on your side, but there are resources available, especially amongst the partners that are working with us today. Now, when it comes to these green investments, and I see the questions coming in, thank you so much. Keep them coming. When it comes to sustainable investments, with what's available on the internet now, I would recommend that, if you are thinking about doing more, or what can you do for your particular sector or your line of business, have a look online and just start Googling, sustainable business ideas, SMEs, sustainable business ideas, small scale agriculture, circular economy in manufacturing, whatever the case may be. And you should there already get lots of resources and ideas about the kind of practical things that you could do for your particular business. And then I would recommend you look around locally, either online or through your network, to find out who is providing LED lights, who is providing solar panels, who's providing solar water heaters, who's providing insulation materials for your windows or for your warehousing, who is providing energy efficient air conditioning solutions. And when you speak to those companies, Maria provided some nice financial analysis there. Those companies should also be able to explain to you what it's going to cost and what your savings are going to be on those investments. So if they can't, then maybe you don't want to do business with them, because they should have a pretty good experience about what it means for you if you invest in their products and technologies. Water saving is another example where just collecting rainwater or using water saving devices can really reduce your water bill in a very practical way with a very short payback period, often within a year or two. So these are all just some very practical, simple ideas I think that everyone can implement, both households and small businesses. When it comes to agriculture, manufacturing, it's more complex. I mean, I'm not an expert in those areas, but there are resources available for that, and I hope that you can find them. By the way, if there are other funding sources available that you're aware of, because in the poll it seemed that people were aware that there were funding sources available, and I haven't mentioned them yet, please do feel free to put them in the chat function so that all the other participants can also benefit from your knowledge. This is also a knowledge exchange that we can try and fertilize by bringing you all together today. Now, let's have a look at the questions that we've received in the meantime. One question was actually, which could be useful for Frankfurt School to answer: how can a business conduct a sustainability audit? What can a business do to find out exactly what opportunities are available to it when it comes to sustainability? I don't know if someone wants to answer that now or just reflect on it for a moment.
I can take that. I responded already in the chat, but principally, I think any of the checklists that we provided, whether it's the EIB, the IFC, the CDC, ENS checklist, can be very helpful to get the first understanding on where you may have potential risks or unanswered questions. If you want to run a full audit, it depends on what's the purpose. I know that depending on regulatory environment, certain authorities may ask you to perform some audits or assessments anyways with regards to environmental impact assessment or social impact assessment, especially in the energy space where we work a lot, but also in the agriculture space. This may be a requirement to get a license, to access land, whatever it may be that you need to present. And then you probably need to do this in collaboration with a licensed supplier of these services. So it really depends a bit on the purpose of this audit. But if it's for your own assessment, you can start with these checklists. If you want to raise capital, all investors may be familiar with these as well. So that will be a good starting point. If it's for regulatory reasons, it may be a little more complex.
Thank you. So check the resources and check online. You could also Google if there's an energy efficiency auditor in your country or in your region where you live. That, again, this depends on if there's initiative already being implemented along these lines. But ultimately, also, if you speak to the companies that provide the products that you're looking for, then they should also be able to tell you what if it's appropriate and what are the savings you can expect along the way. We had another question: what it would cost to invest in solar energy and what equipment or devices will be needed. I can recommend that you reach out and do your market research where you live. There should be hopefully several solar providers. We saw in the presentation that most countries in the Caribbean actually have some sort of incentive scheme set up for solar energy, whether that's because they have an attractive feed-in tariff or it's because they have reduce your electricity bill by putting up solar on your roof, or if it's because the solar panels can be bought in duty-free. Have a look what's relevant for your particular case and speak to your local business, and they should quickly be able to help you with that. It's quite a technical question. Of course, it will depend on the particular circumstances of how much roof space you have or how much land you have and what are the laws and regulations where you live. There was a comment about that there are organizations to set up small businesses, but there's actually very little real resources. Yeah, we can appreciate that the needs are very large, and we are just trying to contribute in the way we can. Try and get on the mailing lists. Another organization which is not partnering with us at the moment, but is worth mentioning, is the Caribbean Biodiversity Fund. They work in around 9 countries in the Caribbean, and they also run periodic calls for proposals to give grants for different initiatives, whether that's environmental protection, And I think there's one that's going to come up in the coming months for circular economy. So got to do with waste management and recycling. So it could be relevant for your business, or maybe, you know, between a small group of businesses, you could get together and put a proposal together and get some of that grant money when it's put out through a call. Just scanning through the questions. So I got a question here from Christopher that says, there's a program called ITC GTC Caribbean, and it's actually seeking businesses that are requesting green audits, and is also providing coaches. And they have funding in Q1 2022 for the Access Bootcamp. So I'm going to copy that into the overall chat, because I think that's relevant and it could be another source of funding and support for small businesses such as yourself to get these initiatives off the ground. Thank you, Christopher, for sharing that. Scanning through the answered questions, because some of them might also be relevant for other people. We talked about sustainability audits, access to the presentations. You've probably seen in the chat, but everything will be available on the MicroPitch Caribbean website, and will also be available to view again on YouTube, on the MicroPitch CB YouTube channel. So MicroPitch Charlie Bravo YouTube channel. I'm also going to open the floor for the trainers. Did you see any question that was answered in the chat that you think would be relevant for other people in the training?
I noted there were lots of questions around, is there a list of funders? Where do I get this funding from? What funding options do I have? I'm aware it's very, very difficult. I've worked less in the CARICOM region myself, but what I know is it takes a bit of time to put all these resources together. But if there are any incubators, accelerators, business support programs for MSMEs in your country, maybe a chamber of commerce, or even sometimes the Ministry of Environment also starts putting together resources. Maybe they have something available that could be of use to you. The answer is that unfortunately, there's probably not one list to pull out and have the magic wand and say, here they are, and speak to them. It's a bit of research on your end. Maybe you can start following relevant groups on LinkedIn just to get some ideas, connect with some like-minded people who may have been in the same situation. It's a lot of networking involved. It's definitely work to raise capital, for sure. We all understand this. Yeah, looking at grants, calls for proposals for grants, especially when you start a business idea, is a good thing. If you have a running business, it may be easier to look into other options as well. Crowdfunding, crowd investing maybe is a new form of funding that is often used for more sustainable businesses. So keep your eyes and ears open.
Yeah. Especially in the local community, I think you can get ideas and hopefully create a critical mass to try and get some of these initiatives on the ground. Solar and energy saving devices definitely have a payback period. I think it obviously helps if you have an established business and you already have cash coming in and you have you know, a steady revenue stream. If you're going to consider new investments, and that's exactly how a bank is going to look at your business as well, unfortunately. They will naturally want to see your capacity to repay a loan, or they'll want to see the collateral underneath the investment, so that they feel secure in lending you the money. I don't think that is going to change in the near future. So if you're a startup, first of all, I would welcome you to enter our MicroPitch competition. Our prizes are very modest, but there are some prizes available for the winners. Also, if you're a startup, look around for if there's business incubators or business support organizations where you live. Often they will also have some initiatives or an overview of who you can talk to. Have a look at our list of partners. to see who would have support and grants available potentially for the area where you're active in. And if you're an established business and you have revenues, then I think you can be more ambitious probably and start looking at really putting up more expensive investments in the short term, like solar, but that will pay back over a long period, a nice savings or a nice steady cash flow to support your business going forwards. We have another question. How do small businesses be sustainable when it comes to environmental concerns? That's really the topic of what we're discussing here today. Diana, do you want to answer that one live?
Sure, yeah, I was just about to type. I think it depends on what your activity is. What is your use of inputs? What's your product or service provided? What's your output? Do you use energy? Do you use water? Do you use soil? Are you embedded in the rural communities and more an urban setup? So again, I'm referring to this kind of checklist that we provided that you could go through and answer these questions for yourself so that you identify the areas where you are sustainable. Very often small businesses are inherently sustainable just because they don't have access to these huge resources. But sometimes there may be, areas where you can still improve yeah, take it from there. So it's a bit of a generic question, but I hope that's useful. I also saw that there's a question in the chat saying we talked a lot about energy. Why did we not discuss other elements of sustainability? We tried to highlight this a little bit in the first few slides, that sustainability is not only about energy, but of course, energy is a very huge producer of CO2 emissions, which drives climate change. And that's just a very big topic. So if we work on energy, we have a lot of it covered, but it's not only energy. There's water, there's waste, there's recycling, there's agriculture practices, sustainable agriculture practices, and so on. So it's definitely wider than that, and we try to give some examples.
Thanks very much. I've just Googled the link that Christopher put up, which is the ITC GTC Caribbean RECP, which is a very large acronym, but it has to do with a program called Strengthening the Competitiveness of SMEs on the Resource Efficient and Circular Production Processes. If you Google that phrase, you'll get to the Caribbean Export webpage, and on the Caribbean Export webpage, there is a seminar about that. If they are providing indeed green audits for MSMEs, then that's already one great place to start. And also coaches apparently. So thanks again for that link. I've just posted it. I'll post it in the general chat so everyone can look at that resource. But like I said, just go through the websites of our partners. We'll actually try and collect some information and put it on the MicroPitch Caribbean website as well, with some links, so it's easier for you to access as we go through. Are there any other questions for our panelists? What have we not covered today that we can still cover now? No? Okay, I think then we can bring this to a close. We actually have a little bit of, we actually need you to stay on the line for a minute because we can put up a code now and a website for you to put in your information if you want the presentation shared with you. Anne can explain a little bit more how that's going to work. Thanks, Anne.
Thank you very much, Flores, and thanks everyone for the active participation. Also in the chat, it was great to again see you exchange ideas and tips and asking questions. So yes, I will now use the floor to quickly present something that Klaus already mentioned in the beginning, because as you might know, the MicroPitch consists of two parts. We are now in the entrepreneurship training series. We're today having the second training, but the MicroPitch also has a business plan competition. And I saw already some questions in the chat. How can I network with you? How can we exchange more ideas? How can I become more visible? So let me tell you, this is actually just the right opportunity for you. You can apply to become a MicroPitch participant. And with that, you join a network of all the partners that Flores was mentioning, financial institutions, international organizations, and other entrepreneurs throughout the entire region. And just some benefits listed here as of why you should apply. You gain visibility, you get a floor to present your business, you receive a training where you learn how to really pitch your business. We saw some comments were saying, I already submitted some proposals, I didn't even get feedback. So you will receive tailored training. How can you convincingly present your business and hopefully increase your chances to receive funding and support in all your endeavors? You can increase sales. You might attract new customers or customers that were there at some point, but kind of you lost touch. You meet your peers, of course, and yeah, just develop your skills. So we really encourage you to apply to the MicroPitch and to join us. Now you might be wondering, how can I do that? How do I apply to the MicroPitch? It is actually really easy. You just go to the MicroPitch website. It's micropitchcaribbean.com, and then you can choose to go to the English one, or you just go directly to en.micropitchcaribbean.com, and you will see a red button that says register now, and that's exactly where you should click. Then you can register for the trainings, which you probably did already as you're already here. And on the right-hand side, you can apply to the MicroPitch business plan competition. You again click the right button, follow the red button, and then you will see a form, which it won't take you long to fill in. It's just some basic information on you, on your business, and also on some of the innovative ideas that you might have for your business, that you might have to boost your business or to develop further in the future. Maybe today with the training, you got some ideas what you could implement, or last week's training on digitalization. So this is the floor for you to fill in some of the information, but it should not even take you 10 minutes. You submit it, and with that, you apply it to the MicroPitch. The applications are now open. They will still be open for some more weeks. We will announce the deadline in due time, but for now, just go to the website, apply to the MicroPitch, and yeah, join the MicroPitch community and become a participant. So this is again to encourage you to do so. And we are not done with the trainings either. As Flores just mentioned, and as we already said, next Thursday will be the last of the three open trainings, where we will be looking into business management and financial planning, which will again be in the afternoon, 6 p.m. Eastern Caribbean, 5 p.m. Jamaica, and 4 p.m. Belize. And here comes the well-announced form. As you're aware, we are issuing certificates of attendance if you attend to the 3 trainings. So this is now the point where you please either use this QR code that you see on the screen, scan it and go to the evaluation form, or follow the link that we will be posting in the chat now. And there is again, the ones that already attended last week know it, some very brief evaluation questions. And then please indicate your name, your email, and on that way we can issue the certificate and make sure you get your certificate that proves that you attended to our sessions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anne. And thank you everyone for joining today. So just a quick recap. There's a link in the chat right now, which you can fill in with your details, and you'll get a certificate and also, I think, a copy of the presentation. In any case, for anyone that missed part of the presentation or last week's presentation, on the MicroPitch Caribbean website, the presentations will be uploaded, and on the MicroPitch Caribbean YouTube page, which is MicroPitch CB, on YouTube, you will find the full recording of the training available for your future reference. So no worries if you couldn't make it. please put in your diaries Thursday, in 1 week's time, the business management and financial planning training, creating a sound financial basis for your business. As Anne pointed out, that's at 6 o'clock Eastern Caribbean time in the afternoon, 5 o'clock Jamaica and 4 o'clock Belize. We hope to see many of you there. Take the time to register on the website. I have another question actually for Frankfurt School. If you were considering entering the MicroPitch competition, what's the deadline for applications?
There's no deadline announced so far. So for now, we're still at least counting with 2 more weeks of receiving applications, and we will announce the deadline in the training next week. So join the next training.
And then the competition itself, the pitching will take place in December, I understand.
Exactly. Mid-December will be the final event.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Frankfurt School, and our trainers, Maria and Diana. Thank you again to our partners for bringing all of these fantastic entrepreneurs and businesses together today, for helping us increase our reach and get this information out there. We appreciate also the positive feedback we're getting in the comments. This means a lot to us. We appreciate your interaction on the questions and in the chat. And we look forward to seeing you next week for our last training session on financial business management and financial planning. Wishing you all a wonderful day and all the best.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a nice day.
See you next week.
Bye-bye.